You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
The story of T-Rex's Marc Bolan is one of those rock and roll fables that seems so trite that it must have been written by some second-rate Hollywood screenwriter. The truth, however, is that Marc Bolan's tale serves as the basis for these overused rock clichés, as he led a wild and unfortunately short life full of fame, excess, pageantry, and incredible music. This week, we're joined by actor and musician Danny Tamberelli to dive into the history of the Godfather of Glam Rock. Together, we try to figure out how Bang A Gong, Get It On was T-Rex's only U.S. hit, considering the Beatles themselves claim that T-Rextasy was bigger than Beatlemania ever was in the UK.
When you're built like a car, you got a hubcap, diamond star halo. You built like a car, oh yeah. One hit is all you need to make the money guaranteed, and you can live off royalties forever. And it makes me wonder, is it just a wonder, or is it one hit thunder?
Danny, welcome to the show. I am extremely excited to do this episode with you because I got to be honest, I knew the T-Rex songs. When Matt told me that you wanted to do T-Rex, I was like, nice, Children of the Revolution. And he's like, no, not that song. It's Get It On, Bang A Gong. And I was like, oh yeah, of course. I didn't even realize Children of the Revolution, which I love that song, was not even a hit in the US. So I gotta ask you first, what made you choose T-Rex for this episode?
Well, truth be told, one of you sent a list.
Oh, perfect. That's perfect.
When my manager sent it to me, and she's like, do you have any ideas? I was like, oh, I get to pick?
Right.
And so I was like, cool. And I thought Thunderclap Newman is one of these songs that I always think is like a one-hit wonder, like, you know, whatever. Mm-hmm. But I know nothing about them at all. And so I was like, well, let me take a gander at what you guys want to do. Uh-huh. And I'm a very big, specific time frame T-Rex fan.
I got to tell you, man, I didn't know much about T-Rex before this episode. And the story behind T-Rex, a.k.a. T-Rex is pretty much Marc Bolan and Marc Bolan only, and a cast of characters otherwise that he would cast aside every step of the way to just gain popularity, whatever he had to do.
Sure, I'm interested to talk about this.
Yeah, but Marc Bolan's story is like a combination of Spinal Tap and Walk Hard. Every step of the way, I'm
my God.
It seriously is. I don't know if either of you guys, I'll tell you this right now. In preparation for this episode, I watched an entire documentary on Marc Bolan, and my mind is blown. Okay, that's all I got to say. So I don't know how deep either of you go into the Marc Bolan story, but I feel like there's several parts of this story that you're going to love if you don't go that deep.
When we picked this, when Danny picked this topic, the first thing that came to my mind was that my first introduction to T-Rex was the movie Billy Elliot that has an all T-Rex soundtrack.
Oh, interesting.
So it's like the opening song is Cosmic Dancer, and then Bang the Gong is in there, and I Like to Boogie is in there. Like, I don't know why that was a choice that they made for that movie, but yeah, I was like, oh, who's this T-Rex band when I was in high school and saw Billy Elliot for the first time.
So here we go with the beginning of one of the craziest rock and roll stories that I've ever learned about, okay? Marc Bolan, from a very young age, said that he was going to be bigger than the Beatles. He just knew he was going to be a star. Even before he played music, he told everyone he saw he's going to be famous. He's going to be a rock star. He's going to be bigger than the Beatles. So we're talking 9 years old. He's saying this kind of stuff. Yeah. So
wait, that's 19.
We're talking early 60s. Early 60s.
Yeah. Okay.
He's saying that. Yeah.
Because he died in 77 at 29 or 30.
Yeah, so early 60s.
Yeah. So
he's saying
that's
stuff.
insane. That's just like everything is just breaking.
Right.
It's just everything is new anyway. He had that vision of like, yeah, okay.
He had the foresight.
And I'm going to do it better.
Marc Bolan, this young guy who just believes in himself so much, by the time he's in his late teens or so, he meets this manager and he joins this band called John's Children, who were not a very good band, but they were a bunch of very hot guys. so he's in this band of hot guys.
A little dabble do ya?
Yeah. And he's this wild front man of this band of hot guys. So that's how he gets his start. And they're kind of psychedelic, but they're not very good. They're trying to be like the Doors, and they're not very good. Their music is not good.
A lot of that, the English doing SoCal psychedelic was, like Joe Strummer and the 101ers, like all that stuff is just like, I know. It's like Ventura Highway. You're like, no, you don't know. You've never fucking been on the Ventura Highway ever. You can be regional. You can have the sound, but be regional with your lyrics, for crying out loud.
Right. And this was not working for Marc Bolan. So he starts an acoustic duo called Tyrannosaurus Rex. We are not T-Rex yet. We are Tyrannosaurus Rex. Yes. Not very good. Not very good.
But Tyrannosaurus Rex did have I did read that Sparks specifically said that they were inspired by the Tyrannosaurus Rex years, not the T-Rex years in their songwriting.
Okay, well, right. But
that's how do we differentiate ourselves? But we're the Tyrannosaurus Rex inspired T-Rex Marc Bolan, not the T-Rex Marc Bolan.
The only band in the influences page that was like specifically calling out the T-Rex era or the Tyrannosaurus Rex era as the good times.
Yeah, well,
those are not good times.
Well, Tyrannosaurus Rex was an acoustic duo. Mark would sit on the ground and he would sing these gibberish lyrics. Like an example of one of the lyrics is Salamander Palagander. And he did it with his bandmate at the time, Stephen Took, who would play bongos and assorted percussion, including children's instruments such as the pixiephone. They were very, very psychedelic, and they kind of had a hippie following.
But this sounds like every band that I've ever seen on the street in Williamsburg.
Right.
It feels exactly how it feels like. What are you playing, sir? My kid's avocado guitar.
Right.
It makes good sounds.
With classic album titles at this time, like My People Were Fair and Had Sky in Their Hair, but now they're content to wear stars in their bows.
Right. But the UK hippies dug them. People were into them. It was what was cool at the time. And they were a psychedelic type band. And they said that Mark really had magnetism. People were really into him. He was always sat on the ground and played guitar. And it was very psychedelic music, but Marc Bolan did not use drugs. He was afraid of what his own mind would do. On the other hand, Steve took lots of drugs.
Took a lot of drugs.
Yes, Steve Took was very into drugs. And what's funny about that is that, so they recorded 3 albums and they were gaining a fan base, and they had a contract to come over to the United States and play shows. And at this point, they were recording their 4th album, and Steve Took wanted to write some songs. And Marc Bolan was like, no, we're not doing your songs. And Steve Took was pissed about that. But they were contractually obligated to come over and do this tour in the United States, which was a terrible tour. They were playing with electric bands and just
really out of place.
Yeah, it was not good for them. So Steve Took, already being pissed about the fact they weren't playing their songs, was then doing things to try to be like a shock rocker. He was beating himself with a belt on stage until he bled, and just
that's a Whiskey A Go-Go story, I think. I think he was in LA, and people were like, "Whoa, we like this."
Right.
Drop your pants, show us your dick, like Morrison.
Yeah. It was not working, and Marc Bolan was not having it after the tour, and Marc Bolan kicked him out when they got back. So that was the end of Steve Took. He will appear in the story again later on. But at this point, it's about 1967. Marc Bolan is very inspired by seeing a performance of Ravi Shankar, and he adopted the stage manner resembling the, Ravi Shankar's traditional Indian music sort of thing. At this point also, Bolan started playing electric guitar. Okay. And,
got himself a Les Paul, I heard.
Yes, that's true. Absolutely. And, at this point, BBC disc jockey John Peel really championed what became now T-Rex. It was no longer Tyrannosaurus Rex, it was T-Rex.
What a monster John Peel was.
Yes.
You can any of the bands you really care about from that era had a John Peel session.
Yes.
All of them are phenomenal. And
John Peel absolutely championed Marc Bolan and T-Rex. Like, he would bring him on the show. I think at some point John Peel would do these live shows, and several times he had T-Rex and John Bolan with him. He absolutely can be credited with T-Rex's rise at this point. Like, absolutely the number one reason why so many people were finding out about T-Rex. And also at this point, Marc Bolan, he's not sitting on the ground anymore. He's now standing up and playing.
Oh, he's made that. That's growth.
Yes,
that's evolution of stage presence.
To quote a great prophet, Forrest Gump, I got new legs.
Yes.
You got new legs. He's standing on up.
So I want to pause this story real quick to ask a question.
Okay,
go on a little tangent. You two are both musicians. You've played with bands. I can't play an instrument really to save my life, but I've seen bands. Have you ever seen groups that did weird stage presence stuff like that? Like, one of the ones that I remember was this weird band called Cool Hand Luke, that their setup was that they would play with their backs to the audience. So it'd be the drums set up front with the drummer's back, and then the bass amps and stuff, and that was how they would play their sets, not facing the audience for 30 straight minutes.
The Smashing Pumpkins were 1/4 Cool Hand Luke because Darcy used to play with her back, and that pissed me off. I saw them once, and I was so angry. I was like, "You're at Radio City Music Hall, Darcy. Turn around! It's one of the greatest halls in the world. Turn around!"
It's funny because then Darcy got replaced by a past One Hit Thunder guest, Katie Cole, who came on here, and she faces forward. So,
there you go.
So that's a step up.
Give the people what they want. I'm trying to think of weird antics. I did go to Hampshire College in Amherst, Massachusetts, and we had every Halloween it was called Hampshire Halloween. It was basically like the most psychedelic party you could have, where everyone was just on drugs, like LSD or mushrooms or Molly or whatever, and just like there was sanctioned safe space by the school because they knew that everyone was just like out of their brains.
Wow.
And they had bands all the time, and sometimes those bands would try to push the envelope with kids on drugs with like stage antics and like fake blood and stuff like that, but nothing. No band I can actually remember their name. Probably because I was under the influence as well.
Nice. The ones that I can think of, one of them, which guarantee you they were T-Rex influenced, and we actually did a One Hit Thunder about them, was Jellyfish, who who their lead singer was also their drummer, who played a stand-up drum kit and sang, and one of my favorite bands. The other one I could think of like that, Matt, speaking of sitting on the ground, was back in like 2005, 2006 or so. Punchline toured with a band called Jupiter's Sunrise. And during their set, they would go off the stage into the middle of the audience and sit down and have the crowd sit down around them. And they were very hippie-ish. and do, they had a song called, I believe it was called Save Me. And they would just do like this beautiful acoustic with perfect 3-part harmonies with the crowd surrounding them. That's kind of the hippie-ish thing I remember of a band we've played with. But, yeah.
I had a couple others that just popped into my head. The Voluptuous Horror of Karen Black. They were all dressed up in, like, horror, gore stuff, and would do stuff like that on stage. I played in a Weezer cover band that only did the Blue Album. That's it.
Okay.
Called the Undone Sweaters. And during Only in Dreams, I would pass out because it's the same bass line over and over and over again, and that was the shtick.
Right.
So I'd literally fall onto the stage and just like keep playing it, but be out, and they would be playing and trying to resuscitate me, and then I would get back up. So that's all the shtick I got.
There you go.
Your shtick is that you get to take a little bit of a nap in the middle of the set.
Danny, I'm glad you didn't let those acting chops go to waste. That sounds.
That's right. Thank you.
That sounds like a good use. Okay, we got to continue with the Marc Bolan story because it gets more and more Walk Hard as we go. I mean, all the parallels to Walk Hard, which I think is one of the funniest movies ever, they just become more and more evident as we go through this story. So at this point, Mark abandons the hippie culture pretty much completely, and the hippie fans are pissed. They're like, what the fuck? Like, that's what we like. And he's just going this whole other direction.
There are tens of thousands of hippies that bought his poetry book.
Yes.
Yeah. Right? That's something I did read, that like he was like the best-selling poet in England in 1971.
Yes.
Which is like mind-blowing. Like, okay, Jeepster, I get it.
It's crazy too, because on the documentary I watched, there were these people that were in his orbit that were talking about it, and they were like, his poetry was terrible. It was like nonsense. It was like nonsense, terrible poetry. And I mean, people.
That's the Jim Morrison parallel continues.
Yes, absolutely. But at this point, Mark's like, I want nothing to do with the hippie culture. And his head at this point is blowing up. His band's becoming popular. He's telling everyone he's going to become a rock god. His arrogance is just through the roof. Okay, at this point, talking about the end of his hippie era into his glam rock era, T-Rex headlines the very first Glastonbury Festival in 1970, and they're headlining it. They're the final band, and they come out, and the whole audience boos. Okay, and so
this is literally like the story of Dylan going electric. That's like what I'm hearing is like the early version of that.
Well, what's funny about it is in attendance.
He was a big Dylan fan too.
In attendance at this first Glastonbury Festival is Billy Idol, who watched this and recounted this in the documentary I watched. He said that Mark and whoever was playing with him, it was always a rotating cast of people who were playing with him. T-Rex is Marc Bolan. I want to make that clear, that Marc Bolan is T-Rex. But they come out, and he said that Marc Bolan just leaned into the microphone while the audience is booing and said, "Fuck off." Which is just the ultimate thing. And he said at that point, the crowd was like, okay, he doesn't care, like whatever. And he played and like won the crowd over. He rocked and won the crowd over. And from this point, obviously, the band adopted an electric sound. Their popularity was on the rise. And then at this point also, Marc Bolan went from this like salamander, palagander, hippie poetry into like really overtly sexual lyrics. He would do struts on stage, little dances, poses, much to the dismay of his earlier fans. His new persona gained him way more fans. And he also did shows in a very punk rock sort of way where he kept the prices really low to attract a younger audience. And it was around this point that he had his first hit, big thanks to John Peel, Ride a White Swan, which made them the pioneers of the glam rock movement. And that song became a mega hit in 1970 in the UK.
I'd like to add a note to
Yes.
that, if that's fair. John Peel had a big thing to do with T-Rex, but more importantly, in my opinion, is Tony Visconti's presence with him is what really did that. Because, truth be told, if you listen to Man Who Sold the World, that David Bowie record that he produced, I think that's the first one that Visconti produced. He plays bass on all those tracks. And the following two, they didn't use him. And Ken Scott produced Ziggy Stardust and oh God, most of my brain. Hunky Dory. But it was all there, and I think that Visconti was really, he had his finger on the pulse in terms of like what was cool, but like when I think of glam rock, like I understand that like visually, Marc Bolan is glam rock, but I still think T-Rex half of the songs on the records were still kind of like, I think the way I think of glam rock is like stone, like you know, again, like I think of the New York Dolls and that kind of stuff, and I'm sure that those parallels are there, and they sure watched Marc Bolan before David Johansen got into it,
right?
But there was still a little bit of Tyrannosaurus Rex on Electric Warrior and on the Slider, and like it never like fully visualized to me personally.
They were pop.
Yeah, it's like a more power pop scenario,
yes.
for sure.
I think that historically you do look at like, all right, this is all happening simultaneously with like the Stooges in New York and like the Velvet Underground, and like all of these are happening at the same time. So it's almost like they're feeding off of each other. I think that it's more that he was able to quantify what was happening in the underground to a bigger level. Because I forget who it was that said it, but like I remember someone saying it never pays to be the first musician to do a new genre. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like Nirvana is looked at as this band that started the grunge explosion, but Nirvana wouldn't have existed if stuff like Mother Love Bone wasn't already happening and them going, ooh, I can take that and do something, I can tweak it just a bit. And I think that T-Rex
also.
Yeah, like T-Rex took what was there and was like, I know how to tweak this just the right way so that this isn't like a New York and UK underground sound, but something that everybody wants to tune in for now.
Fair. There's too many, because Visconti did all this stuff with Bowie, right? And Ride a White Swan was Visconti's first ever like hit single. Like he was really young and just. I'm a huge David Bowie fan, and like my dad turned me on to like stuff that Visconti produced like back in the day, which is how I ultimately. The only T-Rex I really knew was Get It On, Bang a Gong,
right,
and Children of the Revolution and 20th Century Boy, which I knew from watching Velvet Goldmine and Placebo doing that on the soundtrack for that, which is great. Like they crushed that song. But that was like me, diving deeper into it and seeing how much, where Visconti was and what he was doing,
right,
and. He was doing this stuff with Bowie, before. So I'm just saying, like, I feel like he was certainly an architect in what was happening.
Absolutely, man.
And Marc Bolan was the poster child for it because he looked the part.
Right.
He had he had everything. Like Bowie still hadn't gotten to Ziggy yet, and I feel like I'm sure that crossover was like,
yeah.
Oh, he's doing that? Well, I'm fucking Ziggy Stardust now, motherfucker.
Marc Bolan opened the door for a lot of people. And I think it is cool that you're bringing up Tony Visconti. He was all over the documentary that I watched. And
sure.
It is important to note that because you're talking about a guy who went from playing on the floor, hippie acoustic music that made no sense, to Ride a White Swan, which is vastly different. So someone had to be the influence and shape that. And Tony Visconti being the architect of that is very important to note because, Marc Bolan wouldn't have been where he was without him.
Do you like quarter note hand claps in the background of your song?
Yeah.
Come take a listen to this.
Ready for a head-bangingly good time? Dive into the world of heavy metal with the Brutally Delicious podcast. Here, we don't just talk music. We welcome you into our heavy metal family. Join us for candid chats with legends and rising stars. We go beyond the typical interviews, exploring raw emotions and the life-altering impact of heavy metal. So whether you're a diehard metalhead or just curious, join our family and let the headbanging begin with the Brutally Delicious podcast.
What's up, everybody? I am Finn McKenty, host of the Punk Rock NBA podcast, part of the Sound Talent Media podcast network. My podcast is all about doing what you love for a living, and every week I sit down and talk to people who have done exactly that. For example, musicians like Tommy from Between the Buried and Me, Matt from Periphery, Lil Lotus and Shinigami, among many others, photographers, artists, designers, YouTubers like Glenn Fricker and Sarah Dici, and I unpack exactly how they got to where they are today with the goal of helping you do the same. So if that sounds cool, you can listen and subscribe at soundtalentmedia.com, and I'll see you there.
It is mind-blowing.
And heartbreaking.
How many original scripts are written every year but are never made?
So we seek out these scripts and bring them to life with full audio production and professional actors.
Check us out at Undiscovered Scripts.
Movies made of paper.
Wherever you get your podcasts.
Free!
We probably should have started the episode with this because, Danny, we've had people very upset with us recently about things like about us doing episodes about songs like Beds Are Burning by Midnight Oil, where we have a bunch of people from Australia who listen to our show who are like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? Midnight Oil. Midnight Oil has like 50 hits. And we're like, well, our show is United States specific. When we're talking about one-hit wonders, we're talking about the United States.
Hot 100.
Yes. And the reason I note that is because at this point, T-Rex went on a tear in the UK where they had 11 singles in the UK top 10, including 4 number 1 hits that were Hot Love, Telegram Sam, Metal Guru, and of course the song we're talking about today, Get It On, which was just called Get It On there, whereas they changed it for the United States where it became Bang A Gong, Get It On. This era was referred to as T-Rextasy, which was compared, and a lot of people, including the Beatles themselves, say that this era was bigger in the UK than Beatlemania. Paul McCartney said that T-Rex and Marc Bolan were his favorite artists, and he claimed they were the only British group he liked because they were so original. And the Beatles themselves claimed that T-Rex were bigger than the Beatles ever were in the UK. How crazy is that?
Are you familiar with the liner notes of the slider?
I am not. Why?
So the picture, the front cover and the back cover are 2 pictures.
Okay.
One of is the front, and then just the back with the hat, the big top hat on.
Okay.
Guess who took that picture?
Was it Ringo?
That's correct.
Yeah.
How big are you? Well, I want to be bigger than the Beatles. In fact, I want that fucking drummer in the back. He's going to take the picture for our record.
He's going to take my pictures and he's going to make a documentary about my band. That's how big my band's going to be. The drummer of the most famous band of all time is going to do a documentary about my band.
I want to draw attention real quick because you did point out something that Paul McCartney said that T-Rex was like one of the only artists, specifically the only UK artist that he truly liked. And I want to draw attention to what was the number 1 song on the charts when T-Rex peaked. Because the number 1 song on the charts in the United States, when this peaked at number 10 on March 4th, 1972, the number 1 song was by another artist that all of the Beatles had said was their favorite group.
Oh, let me guess.
What was it?
Harry Nilsson?
Yeah,
Harry Nilsson, Without You, was the number 1 song in America, arguably one of the greatest songs ever recorded.
Yes.
It's one of the best, yeah.
Wow. So this album, Electric Warrior, that Get It On was on, it reached number 1 in the UK, and it became this landmark glam rock album. Get It On was track 1 of side B of the album. And like I said, it was renamed for the United States. But this is very important to note in this story, because I feel like this is a real turning point. John Peel, the biggest champion of T-Rex, hated the song. And he publicly talked shit. He's like, I don't like this song. And that ended the friendship. At that point, Marc Bolan was like, well, fuck you, buddy. Like, you know, even though John Peel was such a big part of their success.
There's too many horns on that record. There's too many horns, too much arranging, too much Visconti on that song.
Right. Yeah. I mean, John Peel did not like it, and it was at this point where Marc Bolan really became known for just discarding people left and right. He had all these different managers, all these different bandmates, just anyone he could step on to get to the top. Nothing could stop him. And it's also important to notice at this point when just Marc Bolan's ego is out of control and he is just at his peak. T-Rextasy is at its peak. The video that I don't know if people listening to this have watched. Danny, I don't know if you've watched what is considered kind of the music video for this. It is the Top of the Pops performance.
Like he's got like Native Americans like vest on and big hair.
Yeah, but do you know who's miming the piano in the video?
No.
Elton John. Elton John is pretending to play piano for, those Top of the Pops performances where, you pretend to play. Quick side note. Danny, have you ever had to fake play?
No.
You know,
no, never had to really fake play.
Why I bring that up is at one point my band played on this show on Fox hosted by Howie Mandel called Mobbed, and so they wanted us to play I Want You to Want Me, okay? In which we planned on playing our own song on this show. That was the first plan, but then they're like, no, you got to play this Cheap Trick song. And we're like, okay, fine. So we rented out this practice space. We learned the song. We crushed it. We're like, we're ready to do this. And then it was the day of filming on this show. And they're like, oh, you're just going to pretend to play. And we're like, what the? It was like a crisis because we've had all these years of like, you know, a reputation as a good live band. And all, we're like, we got to pretend to play. And it was like the biggest crisis our band ever faced was like having to fake play, which in the end, it was fine. No one could really tell that we were fake playing. Like we pulled it off. But when we do these episodes about all these, like, you know, T-Rex and Queen and whoever, all these artists who are amazing played on Top of the Pops and fake played. And I'm like, why were we so stressed about it? Every good band ever did this at some point. But as far as T-Rex goes, one thing I do want to note, because I said it was my favorite T-Rex song. Have you guys seen the Children of the Revolution video by any chance?
No.
Dude, you guys and all the listeners have to go watch it. It's them. It's, you know, a performance video, like a Top of the Pops type of thing. But the room is full of adults and children. And everybody, including the children, all look very stoned. And they're doing some of the most unenthusiastic dancing I've ever seen. It looks like they're possessed. And it reminds me, Danny, I don't know if where you're at, you have a restaurant called Texas Roadhouse. Have you ever been to a Texas Roadhouse?
I have been to a Texas Roadhouse.
Okay. Yes. So every once in a while, Texas Roadhouse, some country music will start playing and the staff is forced to line dance. And it is some of the saddest, most unenthusiastic line dancing you'll ever see. And that's what the people in this video reminded me of.
Look, we'll give you $4 an hour for waiting, but also you have to do a line dance once every 3 hours.
Yes.
That's terrible.
Yes. I always feel bad for the staff when they have to do that.
When my son was still inside my wife, I made playlists for him because I thought that was a cool thing to do, and I did it for my daughter too. And Children of the Revolution was in heavy rotation. When my son comes in here again, he'll attest to it.
Nice.
I like Children of the Revolution. That's what he says right now. It's one of those things where you like put on that kind of music and you see like the instant visceral reaction that it has, like not being like cognizant and a preteen or a teen or an adult or whatever, but like, you know, he was like 18 months old when I put on Children of the Revolution, and like he just like, and he like starts swaying and stuff to the side, like really like truly feels it.
I think that says something about how good of a song it is.
Do you think that like guys like Paul Weller and Marc Bolan, who had significant success in the UK and like barely anything here. Like the Jam had more number one hits than the Beatles.
Yeah.
Are you gonna hear fucking Down in the Tube Station on American radio?
Right.
No. Children of the Revolution, like how is that not a number one song? How is 20th Century Boy not a number one or a top 10 song? Telegram Sam, I guess, hit a little bit, but like even that I'm surprised with. Because a lot of the T-Rex, I mean, like, Marc Bolan didn't need a drummer, period. He could have just had, like, a Univox, like, 1970s drum machine and pressed Rock 1 and everything. You could play behind it and just be like, boom, boom.
Right.
You know, just there's nothing to it. But he and, like, the guitar work, there's just something so special about it. It always, one of the other reasons why I thought it would be fun to talk about this, because it is surprising the small amount of work between 1970 and 1972. The T-Rex stuff that came out should have been way bigger here in the States than it was.
It's also interesting to think about because you look at like you look at the long list of like who did this influence, right? Like who were the groups that formed out of a love of the out of T-Rex, or that like maybe shifted their sound a little bit, and a lot of it are people from the States. Like there are a lot of UK bands for sure, but it's like you still got like the Pixies jumping in there, REM, the Ramones, like all of these groups that like cite this band as like one of the huge influences on their songwriting. And I'm looking at this list and it like totally makes sense, right? Wikipedia lists barely scratches the surface. They say like the Stooges, New York Dolls, the Ramones, Joy Division, REM, the Smiths, the Pixies. The one that I love that's on here is Tricky, the 90s trip hop British rapper. But I'm like, sure, why? Like I think that says so much about what is
think
so
about all
cool about
the
this.
sexual connotations in all the Massive Attack songs. That strictly coming out of his mouth. It makes sense.
Yeah, like I'm just like, it's cool. But yeah, you're right. How did this not? Obviously, people in the States got it. Oh, I want the answer.
I actually know the answer to this because Matt wanted to start talking to me about this before we record. I'm like, dude, just save it for. This is the ultimate rock and roll story of a peaks and valleys, and that's why I compare it to things like Walk Hard, because at this point, Danny, you already alluded to this, the 1972 follow-up album, The Slider, it entered the top 20 in the U.S., and then we already talked about it too, in 1972, the film about the band Born to Boogie that was shot by Ringo Starr and his crew, and it featured 2 T-Rex shows in Wembley. At this point, Marc Bolan, his arrogance is out of control. He's hanging out with Ringo Starr. He's hanging out with Elton John. He's hanging out with Alice Cooper. He's at the top of the world. Now everybody he's hanging out with is doing lots of drugs. And at this point, just the standard rock and roll story, Marc Bolan becomes an unbearable cokehead. He is just out of control, unbearable. He becomes a parody of himself. He had, I don't know if you guys can find videos of this. It's really funny. He had this gigantic star. So he would start out laying on the ground and this gigantic like lit up star would elevate him and it would make him like stick up to upright position, and it was so big it was like something out of Spinal Tap. He couldn't fit it on buses or planes. It was a huge pain in the ass for his crew. Everybody was pissed at him. Nobody liked him. People were laughing at him like how ridiculous.
Mark, you gotta lose the star. Mark, you gotta lose the star.
No,
you're gone. You're fired.
Yeah, right. He's unbearable. He releases the album Tanks in 1973. He's still wearing the same clothes, but he's like kind of entered his Elvis stage. People are calling him Porky Pixie at this point. Everybody's talking shit on him. So many people are happy to see his downfall because he was so terrible to so many people. Like he is just so disliked. And at this point, I wanted to do this little bit of prefacing to, he comes to the United States to tour and his ego's out of control. And you're asking why T-Rex did not have more hits in the United States. Well, keep in mind, he comes to the U.S., the Vietnam War is still going on, and he comes to the U.S. dressed in his glam rock gear. He's got the glitter on his face, the crazy outfits, and he comes over here and he's like, let's party, let's go. And as you can guess, that did not appeal, especially to middle America. People did not dig it at all. They were not into it. His gender-bending style, people were just, we're not buying this in the U.S.
You ain't gonna open for Molly Hatchet or no one.
Nope, it wasn't. It was not happening. This was his downfall. He did not, Bang a Gong, Get It On was a top 10 hit, but other than that, no real success in the U.S., despite the fact that there was, T-Rextasy for a few years. So think about this, guys. Think about how fast his rise and fall was. We're talking 1967. He's sitting on a stage with the hippies. By 1971, 72, T-Rextasy is happening. And by 1973, 74, he's now on his way down. And, it's at this point he meets Gloria Jones, who had been a backup singer for Joe Cocker. She'd been a Motown songwriter for like 10 years. She originally recorded Tainted Love. She and Mark began a relationship. She actually played with T-Rex, and he had his kid, Roland, who, funny enough, Roland Bolan. He was Roland Bolan, was born in 1975. Mark started making music that was more a mix of rock and R&B. Fans weren't really willing to follow him down this path of rock, R&B, and even disco that he was making. But it must be noted, at this point, Marc became a likable person again. After the birth of his son, he became very likable.
Yeah.
Well, you can see where the glam blows you up, and then the soul comes back, and the funk and the disco, and you're like, I could kind of chill out. There's a couple Quaaludes, maybe.
Yeah.
Cool.
he was cool. A lot of that can be attributed to being in love and having a kid at that point. And then he had a TV show that only lasted 6 episodes. It was called Marc, and it was on ITV in the UK. But on this show, he really gave a platform to punk rock, to early punk rock artists. He had the Jam on the show. The Boomtown Rats were on the show. Billy Idol made his first appearance on the show as part of Generation X. And David Bowie actually played a song with Marc on the show on the final episode. And fittingly enough, Marc fell off the stage during the performance, and they cut the song. So the show only lasted 6 episodes. So it was around 1977 where Elvis died, and Marc told one of his friends, he went, if I went now, I'd only be a paragraph on page 3. But that showed to not be true, because 4 weeks after Elvis died, Marc died in a car accident.
With Gloria Jones driving, yeah.
Yeah, with his girlfriend, Gloria Jones. And they tried to press charges on Gloria, which I don't think held up. Marc died on the very same day as renowned opera singer Maria Callas. And Marc was actually on the front page, and she was on page 3 of the paper that day. And they said Marc would have been really happy about that, because only a month earlier he noted. And also
That's so dark.
Yeah. Also, crazy enough, back in 1966, Marc had told his friend that if he'd die, he would die in a Mini, and that's what he died in. Gloria Jones was also very injured in this accident, and that's where his rock and roll story ended, which, was kind of a story of this meteoric rise, and then the giant crash, and then redemption by the end. Redemption, with the family and becoming like a cool person again. And, it's kind of the ultimate story, and he was such an influence on so many people. I wanted to note to you guys, speaking of dark things, Steve Took, who you will remember from very early in the story, the original bandmate, he actually died in 1980 by choking on a cocktail cherry.
Oh.
Which was pretty crazy.
I was hoping you were going to say he cut his hands off because he was tired of doing all the percussion.
No. No. T-Rex was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2020. And, us dumb Americans, we mostly know Get It On, Bang a Gong, which is, when you look at the lyrics of it, it's pretty like, sexual innuendos all over the place. But that's kind of how we know it.
What is it? A diamond star hubcap halo? I mean, give me a fucking break.
Right.
You can strut with that pretty good.
You're my dirty sweet.
Yeah, you're my dirty sweet.
You're my girl.
Really, I mean, if you go back to what you said at the very beginning about him being, he's going to be more popular, or he wants to be bigger than the Beatles, and at that time when all of rock and roll was just like fast blues and just being, just being played pepped up and whatever. Like, you can, those 2 records in particular, I mean, it's all just that, like, just that slinky rhythm guitar that he's playing that just drives everything. Mm-hmm. And like, if you play Telegram Sam for a little bit and then you played Bang a Gong for a second, you could be like, is that the same song?
Right.
Like he had a formula that worked.
Right.
Same way, again, the Dolls and all that. That just, you can, what I'm trying to say is that, yeah, he laid groundwork, and then everybody kind of pepped it up even more.
Yeah.
Because I do still feel like there is that, like, there's a piece of glam rock that is a little bit more like pre-punky, It is like, it's just that's like,
he's considered kind of a godfather of punk rock in a lot of circles.
Sure.
And another thing about this guy, just the guy, Marc Bolan, music aside, which one thing that a lot of people said about him is he really pumped out songs. Writing songs was just second nature to him. But even the personality, the person Marc Bolan, just as he knew from the time he was a little kid, he was born to be a rock star. He just had the personality for it. He had the cutthroat whatever I got to do to get to the top sort of mentality, and the personality that went along with it, maybe a little bit narcissistic.
Personal tunnel vision, man.
Yeah.
Total personal tunnel vision.
Well, so at this point in the show, we would normally decide if T-Rex is a one-hit thunder or one-hit blunder. I don't think that's necessary this week. I'm pretty sure we'd all be like, T-Rextasy. Like, obviously they brought the thunder. The blunder is on the United States for not like grasping onto more of these songs. So
being a bunch of homophobes.
Yeah.
But it's just like really like ridiculous to think about that. It's
the timing was bad.
Middle America, they embraced Prince.
Yeah.
So why couldn't they embrace the Queen? That's it. He was with a woman.
Right.
Freddie Mercury, he was only dabbling.
Elton John.
Instead of that normal segment, I want to ask real quick, Danny, what do you got going on? Is there anything you want to promote before we wrap up the episode?
Can I before Danny says that, can I talk to you for a second, just in general? I'm thrilled to be talking to you, man.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're a peer of mine, but I grew up watching you, loving Pete and Pete. Dude, I said this to Matt, like, and I don't know if I'm sure you thought about it, but like, even, I wouldn't say more than Pete and Pete, but you're a freaking mighty duck. Like, do you know that, like,
I have an assist? People say I don't have any stats in the movie, but I have a fucking assist.
Yeah.
Okay? I passed a goal. I passed it to my sister who scored a goal. So that's an assist. That's a fucking point.
Hey, and even past that, I grew up playing hockey, so I was the biggest Mighty Ducks fan in the world. So beyond Pete and Pete, dude, your band Jounce, so fucking good. You do podcasts, you do everything, and I gotta say, like, not to fan out on you too hard, but I think this is really cool to be talking to you today, man. This is awesome.
Well, I very much appreciate that, especially coming from a bass player.
Yeah, hell yeah. I love a fellow bassist.
Well, Jounce is in the studio right now making another record, so we can look for that sometime in the middle of this year, I hope.
Nice.
Probably. I don't know. I got sidetracked with the baby.
Yeah.
we were ready to go. We were ready to go halfway through last year, and then all of a sudden, oopsie, sorry guys, got a little busy.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. That happens.
And The Adventures of Danny and Mike, which is a podcast I do with the other Pete. We've been on a little bit of a hiatus because he also had a little baby girl, and he 2 months ago.
Nice.
So we're working on getting that stuff back together. There's stuff going on. I play in a weird funk band, like jazzy kind of thing called Middle Blue. That we do a monthly show in the city, and we made a record with Mike Clark, who was the drummer from Herbie and the Headhunters stuff, which is pretty rad. So you can check that stuff out, and I'm just a dad. Find me on Instagram if you're looking to, if you're thinking about having a child. You can look at my Instagram and you can decide for yourself whether it's for you or not.
Nice. Nice.
With the jobs I've taken, the bones that I've broken, seems nothing's the way that it used to be. Now it's over, I guess.
This has been One Hit Thunder. One Hit Thunder is hosted by Chris Fafalios of the bands Punchline, Pack, and Another Cheetah, and produced by Matt Kelly of Geekscape.net. Underneath me, you're hearing Battle Scars off the Punchline album Action. Visit punchlion.com for merch, tour dates, and news. We're on Patreon now. Become a patron and get bonus content, early episodes, and a chance to vote on future episodes at patreon.com/OHT podcast. Do you want to start a podcast? Contact Chris and myself at weknowpodcasting.com for how we can make your show sound as professional as possible. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to us on your favorite podcasting app, and tune in next week for more One Hit Thunder.
But I
listening to the Geekscape Network.
Ready for a head-bangingly good time? Dive into the world of heavy metal with the Brutally Delicious podcast. Here, we don't just talk music. We welcome you into our heavy metal family. Join us for candid chats with legends and rising stars. We go beyond the typical interviews, exploring raw emotions and the life-altering impact of heavy metal. So whether you're a diehard metalhead or just curious, join our family and let the headbanging begin with the Brutally Delicious podcast.
Greetings from Evergreen Podcasts. We're rolling out a listener survey and we want to hear from you. The information in the survey will help us gather statistics and in turn make our shows more appealing to advertisers. I know most people don't like ads, but this is one of the only ways our shows make money and help keep their lights on. We promise it will only take a few minutes, but the impact on our podcasts will be tremendous. As a token of our appreciation, we'll randomly select one lucky participant each month to win an exclusive merchandise package from Evergreen Podcasts. Head to evergreenpodcast.com/listenersurvey to help a show and possibly get some free stuff for doing so. We can't thank you enough for the support. Now back to the show.